Hello, my friends, and welcome to Aydt's Picks Week 4. So as promised to some of my friends, I take my feedbacks really seriously because I respect you all as friends. And also, I believe in the customer service model when it comes to trying to, especially if you're trying to promote yourself in a brand. If my friends give me advice on what I need to do, I'm going to take it. So I'm still working on having a background, but interesting. I'm sitting in my study right now, and 2 of my degrees are up there. And then the chair that I'm sitting in, interestingly enough, belonged to my great grandmother. This chair is an antique. It's about 100 years old, maybe even more. I think I inherited it from my mother when she was moving. I'm going to try to get it reupholstered, but it's lasted longer than most things that are built nowadays. But yeah, just the history and heritage into that. And it's a great addition to my study upstairs, and I can sit here and read my books. I have these books, as y'all can see, and then a lot more in the hallway. But at any rate, I've got a long show tonight, so I should get right into it. And also, I would ask y'all again, if you haven't subscribed to my YouTube channel, please do so. It helps me grow. And also, I will be posting that link. The easiest way I've found to do it, instead of just doing it on the computer, so that way I can share it to a wider audience. It's easier to upload these videos, my videos from Facebook, after I've made them to YouTube. And that's what I aim to do here. Keep hitting that subscribe button. I'm up to 7 subscribers, and over 20 people saw my video last week, so that's a step in the right direction. I think once I get like a studio background firmly established, I will earn a lot more. I'm glad that at least people like my show enough to keep watching. Maybe they're just my friends that are supporting me. Either way, I appreciate it, and I love all of my followers. But on to the picks. This holds true. I am a salty ass veteran and been through a lot over the years, 5 deployments and multiple TDYs and duty stations all over the world. I've had some experiences, so good and bad, but this holds true. So on to the Florida-Miami rivalry. If you're a young college football fan, and particularly a Florida fan, this rivalry doesn't hold as much weight probably as our others, more specifically FSU, Georgia, Tennessee, and LSU, who we've played pretty much every single year for the last 35 years. That's pretty darn close to half a century every year playing those teams. Well, we didn't play FSU during the COVID year, but you get it. That's a permanent rival. So Miami is probably, next to Georgia, our oldest on paper rival. My dad played for Florida in the 70s, and he remembers telling me that was the time it was started to heat up. Miami wasn't really good, but Florida owned them pretty much until that point. Miami would get one victory every now and then, but Miami didn't really have a lot of fans, being it was a private school. But still, Florida's rivalry with Miami is actually older than Florida's rivalry with Florida State. For one, Florida State was a girls' school and until the late 40s. And two, Florida State was a very small school. And honestly, Leroy Collins, the governor of Florida, in the late 50s, he mandated that, because he was from Tallahassee, he wanted to get the new up-and-coming co-ed Florida State University on the map athletics-wise. So he made the legislator, and apparently they voted on it, have Florida State play Florida. And so that's when that rivalry started, was in the late 50s. But yeah, Florida's and Miami's rivalry goes all the way back to the 1930s. Miami, it was pretty lopsided for a long time with Florida dominating Miami. But for those of you who have seen the documentary on the U, that rivalry began to heat up in the 1980s with Howard Schnellenberger, God rest his soul. But he was one of the greatest coaches in college football history for what he did solely to Miami. He took the job on a whim. Needless to say, in the late 70s, and he almost didn't. And at that time, Miami's football program was so poor and the games were so underattended that Miami's athletic department was thinking about canceling football altogether. So Schnellenberger, in the business mind that he was, went down to Miami and he made it his project. And he had a business suit. He looked at it as a business. And so Schnellenberger built the U as we know it today from scratch. And needless to say, he did an A++ job. So Miami, all those championships won, everything that we know of the U today was built by the foundation of Howard Schnellenberger. They were going to drop their program in the early 80s, even on into the 90s, even after the success of the 80s. Just because, like, when Miami's bad and things really get bad there, they can't sell out their stadium. Like, they can't even get enough fans to fill that thing up. So what Schnellenberger did was he said, put a fence around, he called it the state of Miami. And so all those recruits that would otherwise go to, like, out of state schools, like Ohio State, Notre Dame, Penn State, Oklahoma, Texas, Florida, and Florida State, you name it. He gave those local athletes, he got them to buy into his business plan to stay home in Miami, and he promised them the wonderful things about the program in Miami. I don't remember if he promised them a national championship or not, but he said enough to convince them to stay home, to play for the University of Miami at Coral Gables, which at that time, the football future was uncertain. For all we know, it could have gone the fate of the University of Tampa, a small private school that collapsed their football program in the 1970s. That could have been the fate of the U. But Schnellenberger started recruiting, and he got all the athletes in South Florida to stay home. And he recruited players like Bernie Kosar and Jim Kelly. And so Miami became competitive, and he really put them on the map when in 1983, Nebraska was by far the favorite in the Orange Bowl game, and Miami had a great season. You know, the athletes were starting to kick in from Schnellenberger's recruits and all that. And so Miami had an undefeated season. or maybe, no, actually, they lost one. They lost to the University of Florida, and Florida beat them that year. But they ended up finishing like the season 10-1 and found themselves at number 2 in the AP poll. And they went to play Nebraska for the national championship. Everybody was so sure that Tom Osborne's, the great Tom Osborne, he's one of the greatest coaches in college football history as well, was going to just trounce over Miami. But Miami gave them a fight the whole game in the 83 Orange Bowl. That was like January 2nd, 1983. And it came down to a 2-point conversion, which Tom Osborne, because Tom Osborne didn't want to settle for the tie. That could have caused a weird vote in the national polls. But so Nebraska scored towards the end of the game, and instead of kicking the extra point, he went for 2 and it got swatted away. Miami got the ball back with a few minutes left, I think ran out the clock, and then they win the national championship. They were the first major team in Florida to do it. And Schnellenberger retired, or he went to the USFL after that year. And it looked like Miami's success couldn't be replicated, right? So enter Jimmy Johnson. He goes down and he capitalizes even further. And Miami just kicked everybody's butt in the mid-'80s. They're probably ended up being the team of the 80s in terms of winning championships. They could have won 4 in the 80s, but instead they won 3. They won 83, 87, and 89, and they had athletes like Michael Irvin, Lamar Thomas, Gino Torretta, Jim Kelly, Vinny Testaverde. They were just a badass team, and they established the swagger and that culture. And then when Jimmy Johnson went to the NFL, they hired Dennis Erickson, and he won another one with him. And then Miami was on probation in the mid-'90s, and that's when it looked like, hey, you know, this program was once proud, but nobody's attending these games anymore. And they still had athletes and stuff, but they were going to cancel it in 1995. I remember in 96 they were going to take away the program again. And then Butch Davis, Coach Butch Davis comes in 95, and they had a few bad years, but then Miami started to be number 1 in recruiting again, like 96, 97, and when that kicked in, they had a great team, and they got screwed out of the 2000 national championship game, and they beat Florida State, and Florida State still went over them and lost to Oklahoma. But the year after, Miami just blazed through that schedule. They had one of the most dominant teams in college football history, and they won the national championship over Nebraska at the Rose Bowl 2001, and they beat them 37-14. Game was in hand early. That defense was probably the greatest in college football history. They only allowed an average of 9 points per game. Had Ed Reed, Jonathan Velma, Vince Wilfork, tons of players that would go on to play in the NFL. It had Sean Taylor on that team as well. So that team was stacked. Florida in Miami, I wish it was an every year game in the late 80s. So Miami fans always get this wrong, and I'm surprised that they do, since that's a private school. And well, half the people that support Miami, I'd say, are bandwagon fans, but they should be able to figure it out if they do research. So there's a battle between Florida fans and Miami fans as to why. So Florida and Miami played every year until 1987. Then the SEC went to an 8-game schedule. So after that, Florida elected not to play Miami anymore because we were already playing FSU. We were already playing Auburn and Georgia annually at the time, and LSU wasn't that good, not like they are today. We played them every year too. And Auburn was probably like in the 80s and 90s like LSU is today for Florida. Like, they're just our thorn in the side. I remember those days. And we already had to play them every year. So Miami fans accuse Florida of dodging them. And that's not the case, because literally Florida had to go to an 8-game schedule, and Miami would have been hard enough to play anyway with that grueling SEC schedule. So, I mean, Steve Spurrier actually was mad about that. He wanted to play Miami every year. I don't remember who the athletic director was at that time, but I think it was Arnsparger or Bill Carr, one of the two. But yeah, they said they didn't want to play Miami every year anymore, and Miami accuses us of dodging them because we're scared. But logically, that's not the case. We just didn't want a freaking grueling schedule like we do now. But yeah, Florida and Miami didn't play again until the year 2001 when we met in the Sugar Bowl. The game was close until halftime, and then Miami ended up pulling away. But that was that team that the next year won the national championship. It was one of the greatest ever. We played them in Gainesville in 2002 and in Miami in 2003 with the rivalry renewed. Miami wins both those games. Florida actually was up 33-10 on the one in 2003 in the old Orange Bowl. I was at that game. I was actually at both of the games, 2002 and 2003. And then that's when Brock Berlin freaking led a massive comeback. That was awful. Like, I'm still mad about that. And then finally we get payback. They come up here in 2008 during the Tim Tebow years, and Florida is on the top. Florida and Miami did like a 180 on who's on top of the college football world. Miami always has athletes. They're always going to challenge us because they hate us, probably even more than we hate them. And Florida kicked their butts. That was the only blowout I remember in my life of Florida beating Miami. The game was close, though. They gave us a fight until the end of the third quarter. I remember it was like 9-3 because Florida blocked a punt, and it went into the back of the end zone for a safety. That was in the third quarter, so it was 9-3 at the end of the third quarter. And then Florida added 2 late touchdowns, and we beat Miami in a field goal in the fourth quarter because we just pulled away from them. But we ended up beating them 26-3. And I remember Urban Meyer, God bless him. This is why we need a coach like that, because he understands rivalries, and he understands adding salt to the wound enough that it pissed off Ray Lewis and Warren Sapp. That Warren Sapp ranted about Meyer, but I love it. I mean, I would have done the same thing. So we were up 23-3 at the end of the game. We were in scoring position. And then Urban Meyer calls a timeout so he can kick a field goal to add insult to injury. Game was in hand. But that's what rivalries are about, you know. And then we don't play them again until 2013, I think it was. Florida was heavily favored in that game. It was supposed to win. That was the Muschamp year. We were just coming off an 11-2 season, and Florida couldn't get anything going for most of the game. I think Miami was up 21-6 at one time. Florida claws back. We make it a 1-score game. Miami holds on at the end. and beats us 21-16. That was in the stadium they're in now. Next time we play is 2019. Florida gets another victory there. Barely. Like, we played so bad that game, even though Dan Mullen was coach. I honestly think if Billy was coaching, we would have lost that game. But that was probably one of the worst called games by Dan Mullen. Because we had the game, all we had to do was like run the clock out, and then Felipe Franks throws a route. I don't remember what the play was, but it missed the receiver. I think there was a miscommunication. And the Miami DB picks it off, and thankfully we put him on the ground. But Miami didn't have any kind of offense then. So there was like 2 minutes left. Florida was up 24-20, and our defense held them, thankfully, because they needed to score a touchdown. I think they got like within the 20-yard line, but we sacked them on 4th down, and the game was over, and everybody could breathe a sigh of relief. But I remember they should zoom Steve Spurrier in the press box when Felipe threw that interception, and he looked so horrified. He was so mad. Fast forward to last year. That was easily the most embarrassing game I've ever seen Florida lose at home. Besides South Florida last week, that takes the game, or that takes the cake. Florida was so unprepared to play Miami last year, it wasn't even funny. And I picked us to win. I think most people did, but Mario Cristobal did his homework, and he beat Billy Napier. Which leads me to my next point, and I'll get to predictions later when I pick the top 25, but Mario Cristobal understands this rivalry. He played at the U. Billy Napier does not understand this rivalry. I don't know if he understands any rivalry. I don't even know if he understands what he's doing on the field half the time. But Cristobal will take any effort in the world to embarrass the University of Florida. He's already stated, you see, Cristobal, he can be a bonehead coach. I wouldn't say he's a great coach, but he understands psychologically how to humiliate your opponents and get the edge. He's already stated that he wants to make Miami ahead of all the other schools in Florida. He wants to win all the recruiting battles. He's already told recruits, he's like, come play for us, look what I'm building here. And he showed it on the field. He plays the transfer portal much better than Billy Napier. He's an offensive lineman, so he has the mentality of the trenches, as he was an offensive lineman for Miami in the early 90s when they won 1 or 2 championships when he was there. So he can sell his brand. It's like having a less intelligent Steve Spurrier on the sideline. Not overall, but in terms of X's and O's, like an in-game coach, Mario Cristobal is not that smart, but the reason I was comparing that to Spurrier is because he's their Steve Spurrier. He played there. They did that. They tried that experiment with Randy Shannon, but it didn't work out so much. But he's a guy that understands the program, is my point. He understands exactly who Florida's rivals or who Miami's rivals are, and he knows exactly what to do to rub salt in the wound in rivalries. He's had the same exact amount of time at Miami as Billy Napier has at Florida, but he's outclassing Billy Napier by leaps and bounds on the football field in terms of wins and losses. And I think because Cristobal understands this rivalry, he knows what's at stake. He will take every opportunity on live TV. Game day is going to be there. He will take every opportunity to make a statement in the most powerful way possible on Saturday night. And I don't even know if Billy Napier is prepared for it. But I hope with my spiel, y'all understand a little bit about the Florida-Miami rivalry and how Miami was put on the map and what this game means to Florida fans. I don't think I touched on that much, but I'm going to go into it. So because the SEC is going to a 9-game schedule, and we're going to keep Florida State as our permanent opponent, that only leaves 2 other schools to play for the rest of the year. And with a 9-game SEC schedule, you better believe Florida's going to want to pick some cupcakes. So for the foreseeable future, if it was up to me, we'd play Miami every year. That's just the nature of the beast. I love rivalries. I love the tradition in this game. I'd say, bring it, Cristobal. We're going to hit you harder. Maybe I should be a coach, at least a motivator like Lou Holtz, because I've got it in me. I've got what it takes. But I chose a different career, so I can't do that right now, at least this point in my life. But yeah, I would tell Miami, bring it, and we'll bring it harder. And we're gonna turn this rivalry on its face and make you eat dirt, make you wish that you didn't have to play us every year. And we're gonna rub it in your face. See, Cristobal understands that, but on Miami's end. That's what I'm trying to say. Like, Miami fans are awful. All we've heard about the last year is 41-17. 41-17. We owned you at your house. Yeah, Ben Hill Griffin Stadium is owned by Miami. It's like a bully. So when you consistently get taunted and you have pride in heritage and culture, the University of Florida is my culture. It makes up who I am. It's in my DNA. That embarrassment last year at the Swamp was a stain on my pride. I would love nothing more than to go in there and embarrass Miami's ass in the Hard Rock Stadium. The stuff they pulled last year, like telling recruits don't go to Florida and basically stomping on our logo and all of that mess. Yeah, I want to do that twice as bad to them. That's where somebody who's really passionate about the Gators and this rivalry comes into place, and that's who we need to hire as our next coach. Somebody who understands it and who can dish it back just as hard like Urban Meyer would and like Steve Spurrier would. But yeah, anyway, I would love nothing more Saturday night than Florida to embarrass Miami and their fans. I want their fans to be able to get berated on social media just as bad as they did to us, to where they'll have to delete their profiles because they don't have anything to say. Because I want them to feel twice as bad as I felt last year after leaving the Swamp drained emotionally. We need a coach who understands that. On to the picks. So, this week there aren't that many good games, unfortunately. Number 1 and number 2 are on bye weeks. Unfortunately, that's Ohio State and Penn State. Number 3, LSU plays Southeast Louisiana. LSU is a team that I want their fans to face misery like Florida is right now. I want their luck to run out, and I want that stadium to be empty. And I tell you what, like, I'm not a liar. Like, some people don't believe me because they've never experienced Tiger Stadium. They just go by what they know and what they hear on social media and in the media. Oh, Death Valley, you don't want to go there at night. Bitch, please, I've heard, excuse my language, but I've heard so much louder crowds at Florida Field than I did in Tiger Stadium last Saturday night. It was embarrassing. Like, I would be embarrassed if I was an LSU fan. Not gonna lie, for how much that they hyped that stadium up. Just how not noisy it was. And that's the second time I've been there. I was not impressed. Like, I mean, I can see why people say it's tough because their fans are just plain jerks. But Texas A&M, honestly, it might be louder than Tiger Stadium. Kyle Field, but definitely Tennessee and Florida are much louder than Tiger Stadium. But at any rate, I've got LSU over Southeast Louisiana by the score 56-3. On to the battle for the Okefenokee Ore. I've previewed this game a little bit and the significance of the rivalry. If I'm Billy Napier, like, if the players want Billy Napier to keep his job, they better come with the same intensity that they played with versus LSU. However, DJ Lagway somehow needs to gain composure. Florida's defense, I don't necessarily agree with some of the pundits and media commentators when it comes to Florida's defense is about ready to crack. You know, they can only carry the Gators so far before they just start giving up. And I was at the LSU game. Like, we were in that game the whole time. Like, Florida was one bomb away from winning that game. And if the Jaden Ball touchdown that got called back for holding didn't get called for holding, Florida would be up 10-0. DJ Lagway just needs to get fixed. Whatever it is, I don't understand how he had such a bad game last game, the worst of his career. Rationally, I think he could still be hurt. They just don't want us to know that. And also, Bonehead Billy acts like he's playing Madden on rookie level. I don't understand his play calling at all. Miami might be the best team in the country, to be honest with you, the most complete team. Maybe Ohio State's better. I don't know. I haven't really watched Penn State this year either. I'll tell you this, the U is definitely better than LSU. I've watched Miami. I didn't watch their game versus South Florida because I was at the LSU game at the time, and when that was going on. But I watched their game versus Notre Dame. They took down Notre Dame, and they dominated that game. And Notre Dame came back in the fourth quarter to keep it close, but Miami dominated that game. Miami has their strength is their defensive line. Florida, if we run Jaden Ball, maybe we can get a crack through there. Honestly, I'm worried that the shutout streak will end this year. Like, I really am, especially if Billy gets fired. But it could help us have a better offense. Unfortunately, I don't see Florida scoring a lot of points in this game unless DJ Lagway has a total mind reset. And he gets on the same page with his receivers, and he plays like he did towards the end of last year. Miami's offense with Carson Beck is re-energized and reinvigorated. Carson Beck is playing much more solidly than he did last year at Georgia. Apparently he was hurt even before like his shoulder got screwed up. He's a Heisman candidate now, apparently. Miami did to USF what, truthfully, we should have done to USF. I'm sad to say it, but Miami and Florida are on different levels right now as a program, as respective programs. Florida is trending downward, and Miami is trending upward. I think this game will be close in the first half. Some of the rivalry vibes will probably make this game closer than it should be and more intense than it should be, and more so than Miami and the media are expecting. Florida's defense will hold well in the first half. I look for like Miami to, just because it's Billy Napier, I hate to say it, but it normally happens. I look for a busted coverage or our safeties to run into each other, and then Miami busts a big play for a touchdown late in the second quarter. But until then, it'll be like 9-7 Miami. They score like 3 field goals. Florida scores one touchdown. But then towards the end of the second quarter, we'll have a busted coverage, and Miami will score to make it 16-7 late in the second. As typical Napier fashion and evidenced by the LSU game, Florida can't get in sync on offense, and we throw the ball and we run the ball, and Miami picks it off. Makes Carson Beck's scoring drive a lot easier. Canes go up 23-7 late in the third. And then Florida can't do anything on offense. Has a 2-3 and outs, and then Miami will score on one of their offensive possessions. Carson Beck throws another touchdown pass. Florida has it with like 5 minutes left. Can't do anything. Billy tries to throw the ball, but it gets picked off with like a minute left. Miami takes a knee, and they beat us 30-7. It's sad to say, folks, but I have zero confidence in Florida this game. Moving on. The Civil War, Oregon versus Oregon State. This used to be a classic Pac-12 matchup. Now Oregon State and Washington State are the only teams. They call it the Pac-2 now, but they stayed in the Pac-12. Oregon went to the Big Ten. But they still play each other every year. I think it switched from the end of the year to the beginning of the year, like it is now, permanently. Oregon State's 0-3. Oregon has one of the best young minds and coaches in college football. Like I said, I take that with a grain of salt because Nike makes Oregon coaches. So we don't know how good Dan Lanning really is. He hasn't won anything. And every time he gets in a big game that matters, he chokes. But needless to say, Oregon's trending upward. Oregon State is not good. Oregon easily wins this rivalry game by a score of 65-7. I've got number 7, the team out west, Florida's second-rate university, playing Kent State. The Criminals win by the score of 49-10. I've got number 8, Texas, and Arch Manning playing another cupcake, much like Florida's second-rate university. They're playing Sam Houston, and they shouldn't struggle. Sam Houston's 0-3. Got Texas beating them 55-0. For my upset pick of the week, like I said, Brent Bielema is a decent coach, but I'm not high on Illinois. Like them being in the top 25 seems, especially top 10, seems out of place. Indiana has a good coach in Kurt Cignetti. That guy has like the Urban Meyer mentality. He might actually be a good candidate to look at for when Napier gets fired. But I've got number 19 Indiana playing at home. I'll put them over the Illinois Illini. They'll score 35-22. Moving on. I've got number 11, Oklahoma, playing number 22, Auburn. I think Oklahoma's still a little bit overrated, but that Mateer dude is really impressing me, their quarterback. Right now, apparently he's the leading Heisman candidate. I think both of these coaches are on the hot seat, and Mateer probably saved Venables' job. The Oklahoma coach is Venables. Hugh Freeze, Auburn's coach, he did good things at Ole Miss, and he's a good recruiter, but he just hasn't shown anything for Auburn on the field yet, and I believe he hasn't beat Alabama yet either. So unless they beat Alabama this year, he'll either stay on the hot seat or he'll get fired. But I got number 11, Oklahoma, over number 22, Auburn, by the score of 45-24. I've got number 13, hoity-toity, good gosh almighty, it's the Ole Miss Rebels. With their head coach Lane Kiffin, got them 3-0. Say what you want about Lane Kiffin, but he's 3-0. Billy Napier is 1-2. I would gladly take Lane Kiffin and his smart offensive mind and amazing head coaching record at a place like the University of Florida. He turned Ole Miss into a potential playoff team, and they were one of the bottom feeders of the SEC prior. I've got number 13, Ole Miss, over Tulane. By a score of 42-28. I think that game will be close early, but I think Ole Miss pulls away. Number 15, Tennessee. That's what stinks, man, about last week when I was at Tiger Stadium. Like, if you go to Ben Hill Griffin Stadium, like, you get Wi-Fi, like, and you get service. I didn't get service in that stadium, so I couldn't watch any of the other games. All it depended on was, like, scoreboard updates, and those were sparse. I was watching Tennessee and Georgia before I got into that stadium on my phone, and then I had, like, no reception after that. Tennessee lost a heartbreaker, but I think they bounced back versus UAB. They beat them 51-14. I've got number 18, the Rambling Wreck of Georgia Tech. They're 3-0. They came off of a great win last week over Clemson and rushed the field. Their coach is trending as well. If I was Scott Strickland, I might look at him. But the only problem with, I think his last name is Oh, it's Brent Key. That's his name. He's a Georgia Tech alum, and he played there, so it might be a little harder sell for him to leave his alumni, leave coaching his alumni to come to the University of Florida. But yeah, he's a good coach. But I think they play Temple this weekend. I think they win by a score of 44-17. I've got number 20, Vanderbilt. They're doing good. They're 3-0. Vanderbilt. I wouldn't say that they're one of the bottom feeders annually in the SEC. They're the bottom feeder. But Clark Lee, their coach, has other plans. In the same way that Brent Key, the coach of Georgia Tech, it'd be hard for him to leave that place. It might be a tough sell for Lee to leave Vanderbilt because he played there as well. He's an alumni of Vanderbilt. But Vanderbilt versus the University of Florida, I think it'd be easier to get Lee. But I'll talk about my coaching search later, and reasons why and why not I would hire certain coaches. But I think Vanderbilt wins over Georgia State by a score of 34-6. I got number 21, Michigan, playing Nebraska. This one is a tough one to pick. Michigan isn't what they were under Harbaugh, but they retained some of the same athletes. They're decently coached, but so is Nebraska. Matt Rule is doing great things at that program. They're both 3-0, but I think Michigan wins. Nebraska usually falls apart at this time of year. They'll do good for about 3 games, and then people will be like, oh, man, maybe Nebraska's back like they were in the 90s. Nah, they're fool's gold, man. This is when they start falling apart. I think Michigan goes in there and beats Nebraska, but it'll be a close game. And Nebraska will be on a downward trend. Maybe Rule will turn them around. But the thing about Nebraska, the reason they were good in the past, in the 1970s through the 1990s especially, because they had a different brand of football, and those were different times too. They had a system, and they recruited players to that system, which was the option out of the I formation. And Tom Osborne, their coach, perfected it. And he'd recruit players specifically to those positions, and then he'd take walk-ons from everywhere that wanted to play for him. It was just a different time in college football, and that's why it's hard in the modern day and age for Nebraska to be good again, is because what recruit wants to go to Lincoln, Nebraska? I mean, not hating if you're from there, but there's a lot more, I'd say, entertaining places, for a young mind. But that's not starting to matter anymore anyway, because players are getting paid now, so it's about lining their pocketbooks. So we'll see. But I imagine Nebraska would be very, very hard to rebuild, at least to what they were back a long time ago. But yeah, Michigan wins this game 24-21. I've got number 23, Missouri. They're playing South Carolina. South Carolina got shellacked by Vanderbilt last week on their home field too. That's why I like that Clark Lee guy for Vanderbilt. But I think they lose again when they go to Columbia, South Carolina, to Columbia, Missouri. And the University of Missouri beats the University of South Carolina by the score of 40-31. I've got number 24, Notre Dame Fighting Irish, playing a rivalry game with Purdue. I think these schools are only like an hour apart. Notre Dame being in South Bend, Indiana, Catholic school, versus Purdue, which is an engineering school in West Lafayette, Indiana. It's one of the older rivalries in college football. But I think Notre Dame, Purdue hasn't been good the past few years, and Notre Dame is trending upward. I've got the Catholics over the Engineers by the score of 47-7. And my boy Saul, hopefully they're not Norvis Ordo Catholics. Hopefully they're traditional. If that's the case, I hope God blesses them and they win. It's a little humor there. Moving on, number 25, I've got USC Trojans versus the Michigan State Spartans. It's a battle in Greece. But I've got the Trojans over the Spartans by a score of 31-24. For my bonus pick of the week, we've got a battle for Dallas. Actually, DFW, Dallas-Fort Worth. The Texas Christian University Horned Frogs of Dallas are playing the Southern Methodist University Mustangs, and they're in Fort Worth. I've got TCU over SMU by a score of 41-38. For my other D1 Florida schools, I've got South Florida over South Carolina State by the score of 31-10. I've got Central Florida over North Carolina and Bill Belichick by a score of 34-21. And I've got FIU, Florida International, over Delaware. The Panthers over the Blue Hens by the score of 28-20. Normally I would sign off at this point because the picks are over, but I'm going to discuss Florida's coaching search or potential coaching search. Now, Billy Napier, last year, he proved me wrong, and he proved a lot of other people wrong. And I heard somebody on a local Gator YouTube podcast recently that said, Billy's like a cat, man. He has 9 lives. Like, whenever you think he's dead in the water, he ends up getting new life and ends up winning a game he shouldn't, and then Florida gets on a roll. I didn't want him to begin with because he came from a non-Power 5 conference. I didn't want Mullen fired, honestly. And I don't think he should have. I think that Grantham should have been fired a year earlier, and Charlie Strong should have been hired as our defensive coordinator. We'd probably be winning a lot more games right now. But right now, Billy Napier is like bleeding in the water, surrounded by a coral reef and shark-infested waters. That's his status right now as the coach of the University of Florida. That's where he treads. Could he get out of it? Not likely, but a win on Saturday would do a lot of good for him. It might get the pressure off of him for about a week. Like I said, I don't see in any scenario where Florida beats Miami, as much as I wish we could pay revenge to those punks. But yeah, it's not looking good for old Billy. But if the worst comes to worst, I think the right thing to do, especially to preserve, if we really want to preserve Florida's shutout streak and not have the players give up halfway through the season and start transferring and all that, I think Scott Strickland needs to come out and say, we will evaluate Coach Napier at the end of the season, and if he doesn't meet the University of Florida standards and expectations of it as a head coach, which he doesn't, but this gives the players some hope and kind of keeps things, kind of puts a Band-Aid over the wound for a little bit longer. But I would probably say that if I was Scott Strickland, I think that's the best way to handle it, is evaluate him after the season. Some people might say, well, that could hurt recruiting if you wait to fire him after the season. It wouldn't matter anyway. The dude's a bonehead coach. Like, he could have the best recruiting class in the nation. If you don't know how to coach them up on the field properly, you end up with a performance like Lagway had last Saturday night. Lagway was the #1 recruited quarterback in the nation. That's my point. But at least by doing that, you can keep the team together. It's like when Ron Zook was a lame duck head coach, but I mean, he was able to stay on until the end of the year. And those players played their butts off for him, and I think they'll do the same with Napier. But anyway, realistically, I think they're talking like the Georgia game, like the week before the Georgia game, we have a bye week to fire him. But that's my opinion. Just wait till the end of the year. I think it's classy and the right thing to do. But who knows? Like I said, he could find lightning in a bottle and pull a miracle, and Florida could snap together. But I'm going to name my picks for who I think Florida should have as a new coach. First, I'm going to go by saying who we should definitely not have as a new head coach that's been kicked around. First one, I'm going to say don't hire anybody who's not had head coaching experience. I hear some people mentioning Glenn Schumann, the defensive coordinator for Georgia. And honestly, why would we hire somebody who is a manager of a defense? We all know Kirby Smart has the reins over that defense. So that's a definite no for me. First of all, the guy has no head coaching experience. And secondly, what I just said, if he goes somewhere else, he might be worse than Billy, like if he goes to the University of Florida. So no non-proven head coaches. Second no that a lot of fans are mentioning is John Gruden. Yeah, the dude won a Super Bowl with Tampa Bay like 25 years ago. Or pretty enough close to it, 2002, so I was 23. The guy's been out of coaching for more than a decade. He's 62 years old. He's barely won more games than he's lost in his entire coaching career. How is somebody like that going to be relevant to modern athletes? And in addition, you talk about relevancy. Let's just be real here. So the majority of the athletes that come to the University of Florida, and I'm not, by mentioning demographic, I'm not saying anything bad at all. Like, I'm just using this as an example. So Gruden was racist. He had some racist emails, and the majority of athletes are African American. How is that going to sell? How's that going to feel to somebody an African American young man who wants to come play for your program when you have to deal with a coach who may have had a racist past? Like, I wouldn't go to that program. Like, if it was the opposite too, like, I wouldn't go. Like, as a white male, I wouldn't go to play for a racist head coach. So that's why Gruden's a no-no. I don't know why some Gator fans are like, oh my gosh, let's get Gruden. Like, they can't get off that subject. Gruden is a no-go. I would also say no. There's another name they were mentioning. All right, I'll give my maybes, and then, because I had this written down, but so maybes that we'll have to wait on is Clark Lee, the coach for Vanderbilt. Like, just because he has a losing record. But let's be real, it's hard to watch, or it's hard to have success at Vanderbilt. I think the only coach that did it since like the 1940s and 50s was James Franklin, and he's at Penn State right now. But he's made them consistently good. I think Clark Lee is doing an even better job than James Franklin did, to be honest. But like I said, he hasn't had enough. His first 2 years, I think he went 5-7, or maybe less. Like 1 year he went 5-7. His second year he went 2-10, and last year he had that amazing year with Diego Pavia. And this year they're 3-0, so the jury's still out on that. I already know he's a better X and O's coach than Billy Napier, but I'd pump the brakes on him. Like I said, no offensive no coordinators. We want a proven head coach. Another maybe. It was a no, but he's kind of trending upward, is Dan Lanning. And the reasons I say no is because, like I said about Oregon, Nike recruits for Oregon. So unless Lanning wins not some kind of championship there, or a national championship, or beats people that he should in games that matters, despite having like a 36-6 overall record, then I wouldn't look to hire him. But it's trending up because because of his record, and he could still recruit the state of Florida. But yeah, it's just, I'm pumping the brakes on that, just because of, no matter who's the coach at Oregon, you're going to have success because Nike, Phil Knight, the CEO of Nike, consistently pumps money into there. And not only do those players get free Nike whatever, they also get sponsorships and all that comes with it, that makes them even more money. So why not go to Oregon, no matter who the head coach is what I'm saying. I would also caution against getting somebody that has more like a Power 5, a non-Power 5 coach, like people are saying the Tulane coach. And honestly, Billy Napier had a better record than him at Louisiana. And this guy from Tulane, Summerall, people are like, oh, let's pick him. Look what he's done at Tulane. I would say no to that, from the standpoint of, we could be looking at another Billy Napier. So that's a no-go for me. And I don't want a coach that has lost more than they've won. I don't want to coach just because they've had NFL experience. I want somebody that has a connection to the University of Florida, or at least understands the University of Florida, or somebody who's a proven winner. So my list of coaches that I would want here, I'm going to count them down. Number 5 would be Brent Key, the guy from Georgia Tech, because he should have beat Georgia last year. He knows how to beat Georgia. he went X's and O's toe-to-toe with Kirby Smart, who is the best mind in college football. He just upset Clemson. He's beat FSU. He beat FSU last year when FSU should have won and sent their season in a down spiral. He's won more than he's lost. But the problem is, for why not, is because I don't think, not that I wouldn't want him, but I don't think he would leave Georgia Tech because that's where he went to school. But you never know. Different things motivate different people. So we'll see. And I believe Georgia Tech is a private engineering school. I know they're an engineering school. I don't remember if they're private or not, but they can probably shell some money at him to stay there. So it might be hard to change his mind, but I'd put him as number 5. Number 4 would be Dan Quinn. He's had Gator connections. He was the defensive coordinator here in 2 stints, I think, under Muschamp. Well, no, he was the defensive coordinator here under Muschamp. I want to say he came back for 1 year under a different coach. But that dude knows defense. He's an NFL head coach for the Washington Redskins, and they're pretty good. He's won more than he's lost in the NFL. If he hires a good defensive coordinator and can recruit, he already has Florida ties. We would be a really, really solid football team. Another coach that I would want, this is number 3, is Chip Kelly. He's an offensive coordinator now in the NFL. That man wins wherever he goes. He led the offense for Ryan Day last year in Ohio State's national championship team. He had a great record at Oregon, so he's proven he can coach at multiple places, and he was a head coach in the NFL. That guy wins wherever he goes. He's been a head coach at UCLA. I don't know why he couldn't get it done there, but that's a basketball school. But then again, Florida's becoming a basketball school. So, but I think with the recruit, and we got close to landing him when we hired Mullen. So apparently, I don't know what came of that, but apparently he got the interview. But something about the money, like Strickland wanted to hire him, but something didn't go through, and then we settled on Dan Mullen instead. The reason why I would not want Chip Kelly is because whatever debacle was left over from 2017, it might be the same thing if we were to interview him again. And also, like, he has no loyalties here. So, and I've seen him travel around a lot. So we could be facing somebody who will come here for a little bit, like a year or 2, and then bolt like that to the NFL. So he has no Florida loyalties. So that's why I would say, maybe not Chip Kelly, but I mean, that's who I would want as a head coach. I think he would, if he did stay here, we would have a lot of success and our offense would be fun again and instantly better. Number 2 is intriguing. This just came to my mind as I was thinking of this list yesterday. It seems like the folks at Clemson are getting very much a "what have you done for me lately" attitude with Dabo Swinney. Dabo Swinney's record speaks for itself. Since he took over there when Tommy Bowden retired in 2008, he's won 2 national championships and played for another. Man's had consistently top 5 recruiting classes, if not the top. Man knows his X and O's. He built that Clemson program from scratch. He recruits the South very well, including Florida. And for a long time, Clemson was basically an SEC team playing in the ACC, much like Florida State. Most importantly, Dabo is a good Christian man. If I had a son that was playing college football, Dabo glorifies his Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, all the time. If I had a son that was being highly recruited and Dabo Swinney recruited him, I would want my son to play for Dabo Swinney. That he seems like a good man, down to earth, cares for his players. He will fight for his players, and he stands for traditional values. He was the last coach in college football to use the transfer portal too. I like that. Dabo has fight in him. So if Clemson fans continue this "what have you done for me lately" mentality, I would take Dabo Swinney here in a heartbeat. I most definitely would. And my number one, I don't know if he'll leave Clemson though, to be honest, but Dabo would be a great fit at the University of Florida. He would clean this place up. And my number one hasn't changed, despite a lot of Gator fans disagreeing with me. Lane Kiffin. Dan Mullen even said that to Strickland when he was fired. He's like, go get Lane Kiffin. And instead, Strickland shit the bed in hiring Napier. Sorry, there's no other way to put it. But Kiffin has ties here. His kids are Gator fans, like, because their mom is UF alum. I think her name was Layla, his ex-wife, but that's John Reeves' daughter. Interestingly enough, the team we play this weekend is who John Reeves got the NCAA passing record against, Miami. So Lane Kiffin has connections here. Like, he knows the state of Florida. His dad, God rest his soul, Monty Kiffin, coached for Tampa Bay for many years. With Lane Kiffin as our head coach, not only would offense be fun again, if he gets a good defensive coordinator in here, Florida will be a playoff team year one. I guarantee it. Lane Kiffin has the swagger, the mentality, and the personality that you need as a head coach because he talks crap. He's fun. He knows what rivalries mean. He gets inside his opponent's head. And Lane Kiffin, I think he's settled down as he's gotten more mature. And I think he'll stay at the right school for a long time now. Lane seems like a perfect fit for the UF job. Like I said, that dude is personality-wise and philosophy of the game-wise, he'd be perfect fit for UF. The reason I would say no is because he's choked in the bigger games, but then again, he's the coach at Ole Miss who hasn't really ever experienced long-term success. But the way he's built that program speaks for itself. Also, reason that I would say no is Lane Kiffin, when he was younger, he might not do it now, but he's known to hop around. So he might be a little bit more influenced to stay in one place now that he's older. He's been at Ole Miss, I think, for 5 or 6 years now, which is a record for him. But I think if Florida throws enough money at him and they have a lot more than Ole Miss, he would take the job here with his ties and connections to the University of Florida. He's even said in the past that he would love the Florida job. A lot of our fan base doesn't like him, but then again, they're looking at the old Lane Kiffin who was at Tennessee, and everybody has a bad past, all right? So not any one of those people can tell me that they've never done anything wrong in their life. Lane Kiffin, I guess, had a recruiting violation back in the day. That was like 15 years ago. He hasn't done anything since. He coached under Nick Saban. Nick Saban rehabilitated that dude, much like he did Sarkisian. And they're both having success, respectively, at Texas, and Kiffin now at Ole Miss. I think Lane Kiffin would be the best and most perfect fit for here at the University of Florida. Mel, I'm sorry about your dad, too, being a UM lifer. Saul, I love you. Mel, I love you. Y'all are both one of my best friends and brothers and sisters in Christ. Please subscribe to me on YouTube. That would help me grow my channel. All glory to God. But that's the end of my show. Thank y'all for watching. Aydt signing off. God bless.